Hi readers, it's Lori. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. I'm here to talk to you today about the books I hauled in the month of April, and there are a good number of them. I'm not going to comment on that at all. I'm not going to apologize for it. It is what it is. But let's get started. So I'm going to start from the, from the perspective of electronic versus physical, and that is that I hauled two books on Kindle. One is nonfiction and one is fiction. So let's start with fiction. This is one I had been really anticipating and really excited about. I've talked about it in another video I know, and that's called The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. And I think it was a most anticipated read for me. January. It came out in January. And one day it was on a reduced price. So I picked it up. The Bandit Queens follows a woman named Gita who's lost her husband, literally. She doesn't know what happened to him. He, I guess, just walked off one day and he hasn't come back. And so people in her village in India think that her husband was murdered and that she was the person who did it. So she essentially got rid of him, which prompts a lot of other women in the community to ask her to get rid of their husbands as well. And she's not necessarily keen on doing that, but they're also not asking so nicely anymore. Like, they are really determined that she's going to help them out by killing their husband. So it's humorous, I think, and it also proves to be some sort of a mystery. And I love the cover of this one. It's just so vibrant and colorful. And I am, kind of connected recently to a number of books set in India. So why not another one? I also picked up The Puma Years, which is a memoir by Laura Coleman. And The Puma Years is set in Bolivia. So it's also not set here in the US, which is nice for me recently to explore books set in other countries. And this one is about a woman, Laura. It's her life story, or a story of a period in her life where she left her job and decided to just do something completely different. And so she ends up working at a wildlife sanctuary where they are desperately trying to protect the wildlife that they can from deforestation, from forest fires, from, I think, poachers or pet trades. And so she befriends a puma named Weira, and she and Weira start to connect. And there is an incredible, I guess, result of her being with these animals and being in the sanctuary and being in a whole different place where she meets people that are really committed to animals in a way that she wouldn't have imagined. She learns about the ways in which we can protect the planet and certainly protect other helpless beings by supporting them and helping them to stay safe. I think it sounds delightful. This one came out in June of 2021, so it's been out for a little while, and I think it was offered free for me as a selection of the month or something. That happens every now and again. So I didn't want to hesitate to look at this one. The cover for this one also is vibrant and beautiful, and I think both of these reads will be fantastic. Then to the nonfiction that I picked up. Both of these happened either as a result of a podcast or a news piece, I think. This one was definitely the podcast read, although it was not a 5-star prediction for me as those others were. The Way Out by Alan Gordon, who is a licensed clinical social worker and the founder and director of the Pain Psychology Center, along with Alon Zib, who is a neuroscience at Harvard, I believe, and UCLA, sorry. And we heard about this, my partner Lisa and I, we were listening to a Mayim Bialik breakdown podcast. If you haven't listened to that one, it's mostly about mental health and mental illness. But we were listening to that, and Alan was a guest. It's been a year or so ago since he was, so it's not a new podcast release, but he talks about the connection, the mind-body connection between pain. And this is a revolutionary, scientifically proven approach to healing chronic pain. He talks about how our minds and our bodies are connected, metabolic connections in the sense of like how we hold tension. I'm not saying that he's saying that there's a magical cure for all pain, because he actually does know that certain pains are, related to some physical change in your body, but there are some examples that he has discovered for himself and others where pain is a symptom of something else that's happening internally. So I'm curious about it. We're both curious about it because we both have a bit of chronic pain here and there. And I'm really kind of tolerating some pain now that has been with me a lot longer than I would like. In fact, I might be sitting on a heating pad at the moment on my lower back. And so, I think it is something to consider. Cognitive connections to pain are not something new, but I'm curious about his perspective on that. And then this one is somewhat different but related. So it's Brain Energy, which was written by Dr. Christopher Palmer, a revolutionary breakthrough in understanding mental health and improving treatments for anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, and more. Now, I'm not going to mince words about this. I have a significant relationship with anxiety, have a long-standing history of mental health disorders in my family. I am aware that my anxiety was really out of control this last year with all the things that were happening in our lives, but it can be triggered by something as simple as having to drive to New Orleans, to a place that I don't know and isn't familiar to me, and worrying about whether I will find it, whether I will get lost, whether I will get in an accident. Like, just, it becomes something that really takes over for a period of time. And I'm not proud of it. I do have ways of managing it, but it is debilitating sometimes, especially if there are a series of events that are causing a different level of brain activity and anxiety about things than normal. So I would love to understand the connections, but there is supposedly a connecting link between mental illness and some metabolic disorders and other health disorders. And there's a link between our metabolism, obviously our genetics, inflammation, hormones, neurotransmitters, sleep, stress, trauma, and what treatments are working now, whether it's medication and therapies or other treatments that impact our metabolism, and what's the relationship between that and the treatment for different levels of mental illness. Mental illness still has such a big stigma upon it, and people, like addiction, people think that you can just overcome anxiety, or you can just stop drinking, or that it's not something genetic, it's all in your head. When you have a family history of a lot of mental illness, and when you've been connected to people who have a family history of mental illness, and you see how desperately they do not want this in their lives, and yet it still continues to kind of pop up and rear its head and sometimes manifest in different ways, it's very hard. And so I really do want to take a look at this and see what he has to say. And I would like to get to this sooner than later. It's not as short as the other one, but it's not a hefty book. So, okay, let's go to some old-fashioned mysteries, whodunits, right? Murder and mayhem. Agatha Christie's Miss Marple, the complete short stories, was a delight for me to discover at my friend's bookstore at Southern Bound Bookshop, which is a bookseller of used books. So this is a gently loved copy of this. I did not have it, so this is a new for me, obviously, and it's a pretty good copy. It has a little bit of a wear on the cover corner, but that could be just from shelving. It doesn't look like anyone's ever really cracked it open, but I love short stories. They're like a little appetizer to something bigger, but sometimes they're nice when I just don't have a lot of time to read, or I can start one and then finish it at the end of the year, or whatever I end up deciding to do. But the short stories of Miss Marple are a little less known to me than some of the other full-length novels, even though none of those were particularly long. This is a collection of Miss Copp's Midnight Confessions by Amy Stewart. This is I have the first one, Lady Gets Gun, Lady with a Gun, Girl Waits with Gun. I love these designs of these covers. I really am excited to take a look at this. These are set in World War I, these mysteries by Amy Stewart, and they follow, they're actually based on some real life sisters named the Copp sisters, who were detectives during that period of time. And it is historical fiction with lighthearted detective fiction, which I think is a perfect combination for me. So this is the third in this series, and it was at my library, and it was, I don't know, 50 cents, I think. And it's also in really great shape. So I'm happy to have found it. While I was there, I also found Scarpetta by Patricia Cornwell. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I'm recollecting these. And so this, I think, is about, I don't know how many in the series this is. It was published in around 2008, or at least this edition of it was. This is not in the best shape, and it's actually a large print copy, which would not normally be something that I would pick up. But to be quite honest with you, I didn't look. I just saw it. It was 50 cents. I grabbed it, and it was on my list of ones that I didn't have. So we'll see. But this one is interesting. She meets a man named Oscar who's in he's in a psychiatric ward, and he's been charged with a murder that he says he did not commit, and that the person who did commit that murder is maybe out to get him, possibly. I'm not sure, but these are always thrillers, and I love the forensic nature of these. You know, she really does delve deep into the details of the murder and the crime. Another find at my library is The Women in the Castle by Jessica Shattuck. This is historical fiction. I have wanted to read this for quite some time, and it also was in pretty good condition. This is a World War II historical fiction novel, and you know those are my favorites. I can't ever seem to get enough of them. But what happens in this particular story is that a woman whose name is Marianne von Lingfeld returns to her husband's castle from his ancestry. Her husband was killed in a plot to assassinate Hitler. I'm not sure if on his dying breath, or if somehow she knows that he would want her to protect the women of his collaborators in this assassination attempt. And so she goes about finding and collecting those women to bring them to the castle so that they can have refuge there. So she first rescues a 6-year-old child from a Nazi re-education home. And then they try to find his mother, and it just sounds like a great story. And I don't know if this is based on a true story or not. It doesn't say that it is. I have never read anything by Jessica Shattuck. I love this cover too. It's quite beautiful with the castle in the background and the fog or the morning light. I think it'll just be a great read. Here's another that I got at my friend's used bookstore, but there's a story behind why I really wanted this. So this is Carolyn Haynes' Summer of the Redeemers. This has been on my list to read for a number of years. I know Carolyn Haynes. She speaks at my library frequently. I've met her multiple times over the years, and we've collected a lot of her work, which is the Bones series, which is kind of a campy, funny detective series. And then some other, a little bit more chilling novels, including The Darkling and some others. This one is signed by her, which is why I really was happy to see this. And I think it's a first edition. But I will read you the synopsis of this because I can't say it any better. And I feel like if I try, it won't have quite the impact that reading the jacket blurb will. So this is set in Mississippi. For Becca, growing up on Callioca Road, deep in rural Mississippi, the summer of 1963 is a sunlit time of lazy, playful days and friends scaring each other with tales of the mysterious child murder that happened 10 years before at Crybaby Creek. But playfulness abruptly ceases when Callioca is invaded by strangers and her best friend's baby sister is stolen. A menacing, secretive religious cult rumored to be involved in baby selling, snake handling, and brainwashing moves into the abandoned church at the end of the road, and occupying the old McInnes place is Nadine Andrews, a single woman with bleach blonde hair, a mysterious past, 9 horses, and a penchant for young boys. To Becca, the members of the cult are a darkly tantalizing curiosity she becomes obsessed with, especially the wild and angry young Greg who vandalizes her precious possessions. But Nadine represents something even stronger. Becca's craving for the freedom, independence, and excitement that riding beautiful horses represents. With her parents immersed in work and turbulent local unrest, Becca has to deal with temptations by herself, which she does by yielding to them. By the time fall and school arrive, kidnapping and murder have occurred on Callioca Road, and Becca discovers that nothing is quite what it seems. Goodness can mask evil, godliness can mask deviltry, kindness can mask lust, fantasy ghosts can be all too real, allies and enemies can bewilderingly trade places, and even the bedrock of family unity can threaten to splinter. Okay, for those of you who've never read Carolyn Haynes, this is not a surprise plot. This is not a departure from her deeper, darker novels. It certainly is a departure from her light-hearted, cozy mysteries. But this one has, again, been on my list for quite some time. And I think it was just serendipity that I found it that day. I found this copy of it because I would really like to get to this sooner than later. So historic fiction set in the 60s. A historical fiction that I have been anticipating highly is my copy of Kate Morton's Homecoming. You know, I've been waiting for this to come out, and this is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. I did want to get something a little bit more special this time because I do love Kate Morton. This one I've talked about before, but it's set in Adelaide Hills, which is in Australia, and it follows a story about a murder that occurs and it's based on a real story, but the Turner family tragedy of 1959. It's a dual timeline where this girl is summoned to be with her grandmother, who is old and potentially dying, and there's a connection between her family and the Turner family murders. I cannot wait to get to this. I love this spooky cover too. I always love a hallway or a tree, a copse of trees that really covers a space and draws you in. And this one is no exception. It's just beautiful. And because it's a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, it has a Q&A with her at the end. I want to get to that one sooner than later as well. One of my other anticipated reads was A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I read this during this month, so I'll be giving a review on this in a separate video, but this is a buddy read I did with my friend Tammy. It is horror. It is short, a lot shorter than I thought it would be. And yeah, I'll tell you about that soon, but I hauled this right at the beginning of the month. And then my last order for Book Depository, for those of you who don't know, Book Depository is closing, I think the 26th of this month. Let me look and be sure before I tell you. Yes, it is closing on the 26th. I'm not sure when I'm going to get this edited and posted, so it's very, very sad to me because they've offered free shipping and really great prices on books. But I ordered 3 books, and this is the one that came in first, and that's Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I have really wanted to collect TJ Klune's novels. I do want the most recent one about the puppets too, but I have never read anything by TJ Klune, so I am collecting something by an author that I haven't read, which I know how that goes. This one has a Sharon's Crossing. The tea is hot, the scones are fresh, and the dead are just passing through. An uplifting story about life spent at the office and a death spent building a home. That's all I needed to want to read this book. So it is a story about Wallace, who is collected by a reaper, and Hugo, who owns a tea shop, who says he will help him cross over. Wallace and Hugo grow closer. I think this is a queer story, as I recall. I think this is a queer story. I think the first one that I haven't finished reading or haven't started reading is also The House in the Cerulean Sea is also. Being queer himself, TJ believes it's important now more than ever to have accurate, positive queer representation in stories. You can find more about him at tjkloonbooks.com. These are lovely covers, all of them. And I'm excited to have this one and then get to the other one too. V.E. Schwab said, I loved it. It was like being wrapped up in a big gay blanket. So if you're not a fan of queer stories, obviously this may not be for you, but I think that I will really enjoy it. Okay, that's it. I hope you had a little cup of coffee or tea or something, or you push pause to be able to take a break, whatever you needed to do for this haul. That's a lot of books, I know. I did not purchase a book of the month in April. I skipped my April book of the month, which is unusual for me, but I just really didn't see anything that I couldn't live without. Thanks for joining me. I'd love to hear what you hauled in the month of April. If you've read any of these, certainly let me know. Weigh in the comments below. And as always, let's just say this, happy book collecting and happy reading. Bye.